There's a version of this movie where, Mr. Miyagi teaches Daniel karate and then like dies in the third act. And
Or he actually like flies away into the trees or something.
yeah,
I could see that. Sorry.
goodbye, Daniel-san. Hello, this is Your Favorite Movie is Racist. I'm Chris,
I'm Tawny.
I'm Miles.
and we are two blacks and a Mexican. This podcast slash show is meant to take the movies that we really enjoy and look at them through a different lens, which is the lens of, is this racist? A lot of these movies are our favorite movies, but they aren't without fault. And so we like to examine like some elements of them and make choices about whether they still hold up, knowing what we know about some of the creative choices that were made and some of the problematic things that are brought forward through those choices. So this week's movies, uh, this week's movies are near and dear to us. Today we're going to be talking about The Karate Kid, Part 1 and 2. Released in 1984 and 1986 and directed by John G. Avildsen. These movies are considered classics by many, particularly the first one, and has many not only quotable lines and references across other movies, but also has one of the most famous kicks in movie history. And so we felt like this would be a great movie or movies to talk about this week, because you can't really talk about one without talking about two, in our opinion. So why don't we start off talking about what we love about The Karate Kid?
For me, and rewatching them just recently is again and I haven't rewatched 3,
Oh,
which I will eventually.
I just watched it last night.
The Bad Boy of Karate. That's all I remember.
Oh my
Um,
god.
I think the number one thing for me is Mr. Miyagi. Like what a brilliant performance. Um, Completely not that he. I mean, and Pat Morita is Japanese American. Not he doesn't actually, and we'll talk about this later. But the accent in the movie, of course, is not real. And people knew him from Happy Days, and he was a comic and all of that. But it's almost a flawless performance, and he got the Oscar nod that year, despite some of the problems maybe with this character. The performance of this character of Mr. Miyagi is nothing but perfect. And even though, and to kind of reflect back on Dick Halloran, like in The Magical Negro, the trope of the Magical Negro, he kind of almost veers into the territory of the magical Asian, but it's like and for all those reasons, like he's a comforting presence. He's paternal. He is the father that's missing from Daniel's life, and there's just this beautiful chemistry, and his performance has so many beautiful notes, and there's so many details, and you can just tell that he really wanted to do this correctly. And I think there are problems with, especially in part 2, some of the other performances from by actors maybe who had to sort of fake their accents. But for me, Mr. Miyagi's sort of an impeccable performance.
I'd say like for me, the interesting thing about this movie is called The Karate Kid, but it's not really about karate at all. Like it's like that's kind of sort of a secondary thing. I think it feels like it's more of a movie about fathers and sons, like in my opinion. I'm pretty sure a lot of people have that same like assessment of it. But I mean, Daniel has no father. Miyagi gets to be a father, and after his son is like taken from him, basically, while he's away at war, his wife, their child, they lose the child, and it's like it's also like just about the different like approaches to fatherhood. I think and like the effects that it has on like its recipient. Like, because they're both surrogate fathers, like Miyagi and then uh, what's the name? The Cobra Kai, John Kreese. They're both surrogate fathers in a way because you never see either of their fathers. You don't see what's the kid Johnny. You never see his dad. You never see obviously Daniel's dad. We find out later is passed away, but you never see their actual fathers. You just see their surrogate fathers, and it's the way that they're parented by those two surrogates that's like showing the difference in like fatherhood. And like Crease is like obviously the abusive father that's like forcing his own like inadequacies onto like his students like and then like Miyagi is like sort of this very soft, like understanding and patient like father, like and there's like this duality of fatherhood going on, which I never really thought about that like watching it, younger, but as I'm watching as I'm older, I'm like, man, this is like a beautiful story about fatherhood. like is and the karate aspect is so minor to me and so secondary because especially in the second one there's almost no karate in it until like the final scene like it's just a bunch of like pump faking the whole time about them talking about fighting but
Yeah.
it, I also just love like the pace of it like because it kind of has that same like vibe as Rocky and I know that this guy directed Rocky too the first I know he directed the first one and he directed, I think, the terrible one, Rocky Five.
Rocky Five.
Like,
Yeah.
but it's the
The
same
terrible one.
director, and I could
Wow.
tell because the pacing. Well, he did the great one too, which is the first Rocky, like
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is paced incredibly, and this movie is paced incredibly. It eases you in. It takes its time, but it's not overlong. But it also does not rush at all, like getting to what it wants to get to. Like it takes its time revealing, it like allowing you to spend time with these characters and like get to know them. So for that and like just like you said, Miyagi is like my favorite part of this movie. But like it's just it's really is a classic. Like watching it now, I'm like, man, this is like a flawless movie. Like there's things that we'll point out obviously in it, but it really is like a perfect movie in a lot of ways. It's just perfect.
It's funny. My like the reason that I was like, remember, I think I texted you guys like Karate Kid was because my sister's a Netflix fiend, and she's like, oh my god, I'm watching the Karate Kid. She was texting me, Mr. Miyagi, and she was like sending me all these emojis, and it's just like that's the power that character had over all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he's Miyagi is like an icon and um really like I mean that's where all there are references to him across the board. You know what I mean? He was human Yoda to us. And I think for the third time in 4 episodes, I'm gonna talk about actually actually I was gonna say I'm gonna talk about a child performance. But I'm not going to talk about a child performance because apparently Ralph Macchio was 22 when he did these.
Yeah. A childlike
He
performance.
only looked 14. Yeah.
Yeah, he looked very young. But Ralph Macchio is great in these movies too, and for him to be with alongside such a great performance in Pat Morita just adds to it because there's scenes, particularly in the first one, where I was like, man, you just get drawn into the scene, and he feels like a real character. He doesn't feel like you know, a 80s movie heroic type of character. He feels like a real kid. And like
Absolutely.
that scene when he loses it because he's so tired of all the little exercises Miyagi has him doing. It felt so genuine because he just curses left and right and is like ready to go and he's like because their relationship feels so genuine. The characters really work in this movie, and there's good chemistry between him and Elizabeth Shue. There's the relationships are believable. Johnny's a jerk. I mean,
The classic
but
jerk.
yeah, but they even managed in that first movie to to add a little bit of nuance to him, like a little bit.
When he
Like
lost.
yeah, when he
Mm-hmm.
lost, when he the reactions to being told to sweep the leg, all those little things that his little reactions and stuff. The acting on his part was good with what he was given. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure it was like, yeah, you got to be a jerk.
What I will say is maybe out of all like between the three movies, he's maybe
The least douchey.
the least
Yeah. Somehow the other two are worse.
are far worse because they both hit women. The other two, like they both like are okay with
Punch,
hitting
like
women,
punch women.
punching. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's so
Then the
yeah.
dude in the third one kicked the girl in the stomach, which I was like, damn, dude, like that's like
Yeah, yeah.
really. So he's a complicated character. He's you know what? He's a bully that I actually don't hate. Like I don't dislike him, and he does everything to make you dislike him. But he plays the character so well that I actually enjoy his interactions with Daniel. Like even though there's constant conflict between them.
Yeah, I think that yeah, it's the Karate Kid is just it's got so much of a tie to pop culture that people who haven't
Sweep the
even seen
leg.
it, yeah, people who haven't seen the movie know, I mean, it's come back in the form of that Cobra Kai series, and it's actually that series is actually really well received. I haven't seen it yet, but
I
Either,
haven't
yeah.
either.
I've heard really good things about it. Which when I saw the first trailer, I was like, man, why are they doing this? But then like I heard that it takes a really interesting perspective on the characters. But one thing that it's funny, like Miles, when you mentioned that this was the same director from Rocky. It's so funny. I didn't know that, but I remember thinking this reminds me of Rocky, not just the overall sports like that those things that are true across movies, but even Daniel as a character and like so what I thought about is the scene when Daniel's being a real jerk to Elizabeth Shue. Allie. Daniel's being
Yeah.
a real
Hmm.
jerk to Allie, and then he's all mad because he saw her with Johnny, uh, and he goes and confronts her, and he is like aggressively like in her face, and like he keeps putting his hands on her and stuff. And I was like, man, this, and it reminded me of that scene in Rocky when he's like with Talia Shire and he's like in her face and he won't like and it's like this scene. I don't
Like
know if
low
this scene.
key
Yeah,
rapey.
right,
Like,
right.
Low
I'm
key
like,
rapey.
so maybe this director is just like
yeah.
maybe that's his thing is like really aggressive Italian male leads. But of all ages. but I yeah, the beyond the acting, like I think the direction's really good because it makes compelling, it makes things that really good directing to me makes things that are kind of unbelievable believable. And I think we were talking about in the text in both movies how the final move that Daniel is supposed to be doing are all like really like it's like not
Super
that big of a
trash.
deal, right?
Super trash.
It's a kick and it's a bunch of like punches, and but because of the way it's filmed and the way it's set up and the build up and the swelling of the things around it, it makes those moments really powerful. Whereas as we've seen in these remakes of they've done two remakes of these of the Karate Kid, in both cases people did not receive them well, even though the moves were technically more impressive.
That's such a great point. I mean, like that's such a great point. Like it really, yeah. Like like why would you be impressed by just like punching someone left and right? There's no reason why that fucking guy who's clearly way better than Daniel
Everybody is better than Daniel.
on
Like,
every level.
can we just say how like
He's just
I
punching and
watched
then
all
turning, and we're like, yeah,
I watched the third one last night, so like I kind of completed the trilogy, and we were laughing. Like I was watching with my daughter because me and her like watched all three of them, and she loved like the first one, and even the second one. We were like, this is still pretty good. There's some problems obviously with the second one, but I'm like, I still enjoy this one still. Like, and that's the one. The third one, ironically, which is the worst one, is the one I remember the most for some reason. I just always remember that the cliff scene with them getting the bonsai
Yep,
tree. I don't know
the
why I just
bonsai
always
tree.
remember that scene, but like the thing about Daniel is he sucks at karate. He's terrible. He's not good at karate. Like so, like what you're saying, Chris, is like the part of it being like unbelievable. Like, because the thing for this, just compare it again to like Rocky, where Rocky through each film progressively gets better. Like the first movie, he's very raw. He's very just a street brawler, and it's an underdog story. And he gets a shot, and you more so respect him for just going the distance. He doesn't win, and you respect him by the end because he goes the distance. By the second and third films, he becomes a boxer. He actually is like a formidable opponent, and he's a really good boxer. Like at some point where even though like I think it's the third one where I think it's something with him and Mickey where he feels like he was fighting, a bunch of people that weren't really, worth anything but he's formidable. Daniel is terrible, period. Like he's not good at karate, like through each film, but there's something heartwarming about him, and he's still always just this kind of kid that's like the underdog that you go with because the moves aren't great. And even funnier in the second one is like how little time he actually, at least in the first movie, like he invests a lot of time in teaching him technique and like his inner like mental, like where your mind needs to be, because this is not about fighting, this is about defense. And in the first movie, he's you know, coaching him up and teaching him discipline. And we don't want to fight. This is just sort of a last result. And even how Miyagi deals with the sensei, where he never hits him, he just allows him to destroy himself. And that's sort of the message that he's teaching them the entire time, which sort of gets undercut like in the second movie, because he teaches them that whatever that barrel move or whatever, like
The drum
one time
thing?
the drum move, he teaches
Yeah.
them it one time, and then at the end he's just repeatedly punching this dude in
He
the
just
face.
beats the brakes off the
And I was
dude,
like,
but like,
wait, isn't this
yeah.
against completely what Miyagi
Well,
like is like
I mean,
about?
it was weird. Like when you see the move practice, because you could tell like what they were trying to create. It was
Yeah.
almost felt like a dodge move where you're like,
Yeah, where he
But
would
in
do
the
the
actual
same thing.
practice,
Yeah, I
he's
thought he
just
would do the same
slapping this
thing,
dude.
just slapping him in the face. I thought he would do the same thing that Miyagi did with Kreese's character, where he
Right.
just dodges him and he ends up taking himself out, much like what something would Miyagi
I
would
wonder
teach
if
him.
that was
Yeah.
in the original script and they were like, yeah,
Let's just have
no,
him.
Let's
it's
just
too
have him
subtle.
punch him repeatedly. This guy is
Yeah.
clearly better
This
with
guy
the,
who's
with the
It was
scorpion
like,
outfit on.
like me and my wife were sitting there. We were like, "What the?" Because like, because it's like they're doing the drum thing. And you're like, "Oh, he's gonna like," and he just.
He's just like completely comboing this dude in the face.
hard, and the dude is selling the punches because he's just
Yeah.
like, and it's like it almost makes Daniel look like really brutal in the moment because
Yeah.
he's all bloody too. Like, but so okay, to get back to, we're talking about greatness, and we got sidetracked. This might be clipped for.
We were talking.
We have to
We've been
mention
talking
this.
about karate moves for like
Right.
10 minutes.
I had to say this, okay?
So, but to your point about Daniel not being good at karate, I actually think that was kind of the point of
Yeah.
at least the first two movies, was that he's never presented as being really good at it. Like he's presented as like you said, like Miyagi is really just trying to get him to understand the purpose of karate and like use it within the context of his life. And Daniel is painted as, I think, a little bit like a survivor, like they're going to this new place, he can't figure it all out. He has that breakdown really early in the movie that was really good. Like it reminded me, I had a similar breakdown when I was a kid, so it always hits me emotionally when he's like, I hate it here, I want to go home. Like it's so real and raw, and like and Miyagi is taking him on this journey of like, and the through line is perfect because he hits Miyagi's door during that breakdown, and like Miyagi then makes a choice in that moment to take him under his wing, and throughout the rest of the movie, that's what he's doing. And never is he concerned about the fight, he's concerned about Daniel and like that
Yeah.
relationship, and so it's like
Yes,
I
that's a
think
good point.
Daniel I think it's good that he's bad at it. I remember we were pointing out his awkward, like even like at the end of the first movie, every time he fights, he's got this weird like he just doesn't look comfortable out there.
He's
Yeah, he looks.
gangly.
Yeah,
Like he's got a
Yeah,
and he's
gangliness.
all
Like
like he's got this like
yeah,
like and
he's not in control of his he's not in control of his muscles the way that like when you look at the Cobra Kai kids, like it's discipline control. And Daniel has none of that and is like the gangliest possible teenager that you, or not even a teenage 22-year-old that you could have cast in this role.
yeah, he's very lanky, gangly, and they even like, and the reason why it may have all been some of that may have been incidental. Who knows? The director could have been like, no, he's gonna look cool, like, but I don't think that's the case. I do think it's an
No,
intentional
yeah.
like, and the way that they even play up that when he has that scene with Miyagi when he's training and he starts dancing around trying to you're like, yeah,
Doing
yeah,
the
come on, hit me,
footwork,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and Miyagi just
yeah.
takes him down, and it's just like, you can tell that it's just, yeah, it's like he's all
He reminds me
trying
of
to
a
prove
puppy.
himself. Yeah, he's trying
Yeah,
to
he's
prove
all over
himself.
the
He's a
place.
puppy.
He's got a
Yeah,
scrappy
He's all
dude nature to him. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I saw something where the director, they were talking about when he read, I guess, for that job. The director, like after meeting him, they were like, he's totally obnoxious. Like that was their impression of him. It's like he's just obnoxious, but this is perfect. That's what we want. We want someone that's kind of scrappy. And they kind of they changed his last name because he's Italian, they kind of made him Italian. His name, I forget what the last name was, something different at first. And they changed it. Yeah, they changed it to make him Italian in the movie. And I don't know if they were always coming from Jersey or whatever.
Presumably,
But
they cast the mom afterwards. Then.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it was like that. I think the creators were like kind of knew they purposely casted the right person like for the role.
I think, yeah, and I asked you guys earlier if you've seen The Outsiders, but and I won't give anything away, but he's like a deeply wounded human who nonetheless is the most compassionate person the most compassionate, kind, beautiful soul in that movie. So if you ever get around to it, and if you want to see what I'm sure the directors of the Karate Kid saw when they hired Ralph Macchio, like that's it.
I gotta check that out. Oh,
Yeah.
I gotta say this one last thing too. I guess maybe about to move on, but the scene in the second movie, I almost like teared up. What's his name? The Miyagi they performed like after his dad dies and they're sitting there out there on the beach.
Oh
my
that's
god!
That's a
It's
great
like, yo,
scene.
this scene is amazing. Like him just kind of sitting there consoling him and like trying to you could tell that their relationship seems so genuine right there. Like they actually are friends. And he makes reference to I can't remember if it's in the third one or not, but he says something like, "Yo, Miyagi's my best friend," basically. And like that scene, you could tell like he's like, yeah, these people love
when he
each
puts
other.
his arm around him,
Yeah,
when he puts his arm around it, like it's a little reversal, like a little role reversal, and it's such a beautiful note.
And Miyagi, like his performance, he says nothing, but his performance right there, I'm like, man, this scene is
so
like
affected.
golden. Yeah, great.
Because Daniel knows what he needs to hear in the moment, because he knows Miyagi hasn't seen his father in all these years. And so he makes that comment of like, yeah, when my dad died, I kept thinking I wish I would have been with him more. But, like he kind of set it up like, I know exactly what you're feeling.
It's an excellent scene. And I don't think, maybe I don't remember in the first movie, I don't know if we know that Daniel's dad is dead. Do they say it in now, or they just
I don't
they
think
don't
so.
say it?
I don't think it's ever mentioned.
I think this is our first time even finding out that he died. Like I think in the first movie, he just maybe it's an 80s movie. There's a lot of divorce that was going on, so we all probably maybe just assume this is just a divorce, a ET situation, like the dad ran off with, like somebody.
That was a classic 80s like story beat. Absolutely.
Because it was reflecting like reality. Like a lot of people were getting divorced like at that time. So
no, that's
absolutely.
That's just a funny way to frame it. I just thought it was an ET situation. You're talking about divorce. What's racist about The Karate Kid. This is actually, so just to frame it, like I feel like this might be, of the movies we've done so far, the least like talked about. Um, at least from what I've seen. Like, the other stuff has been brought up in different circles, some more than others, but I feel like this one's a little bit not as
Also,
talked
though,
about.
I want to point out maybe the most talked about because none of us had to experience like feeling what this feels like firsthand to see maybe yourself represented. The thing about Mr. Miyagi, and I think I touched upon this earlier, was that he veers a little bit close to that magical sort of quality that we see in the magical Negro trope. He hits a couple of those notes in the first movie. I think the problem maybe isn't so much in the performance or the character in this case in and of itself as it is like in the context of, we don't have a lot of Asian characters on film at this point in history. There's not a lot of Asian characters in mainstream film, and the one that we get is hits so many stereotypical notes. The sort of mysticism, the martial arts, the sort of the way, and I think, while he is tenderhearted, he has that sort of he's very strict and very like particular about what the right way to do things is. So there's these sort of notes. And it's not that that character in and of itself necessarily is like a racist character, but in the context of a complete dearth of other types of characters who are Asian, it reads that way, or it can read that way.
This is something that sort of maybe is overlooked by other groups of people. And I read like a couple articles. I read one specifically where this guy, he was kind of talking about how he hates Mr. Miyagi, and it was kind of talking about his father. Like they got approached like
Mm-hmm.
several times.
Buying ice
His
cream.
Yep, and
Mm-hmm.
they like some young white kids were just kind of teasing his dad, saying like, you know who exactly you look like, and they're doing the wax on, wax off thing. And he's like, my dad looks absolutely nothing like Mr. Miyagi at all. Like they couldn't look further from, like, they just don't look the same. And it happened like consistently where it was just like it didn't seem like a problem to anybody but the people that knew that it was a problem too. Like everybody
Yeah.
else kind of over, because it's like, yo, it's not affecting you. And of course, America, the way America does things, they don't give a shit. They don't care what, like, they don't think about, like, okay, if we're making this movie, like, this, why does he need to talk like this? Like, every Asian or person, Asian American, or just a Chinese or Japanese person of that descent, this is not necessarily this old wise like sage character that has like speaks in these parables and philosophies and all like that's just such a one note character, and he doesn't even sound like that in real life. And I remember the guy in that article saying like he was asked the question like he's like, I wondered why couldn't he just use his regular voice when he did the part, because he could still play that part and just talk like in his regular voice. Why do you have to talk like the stereotype of what America thinks, that all, a lot of Asian people sound like this? They all know
Mm-hmm.
karate, they all know martial arts like in some type of way, or kung fu or whatever the hell. Like they just assume that they know this stuff, and it's like, what? No, like, everybody doesn't. Why would everybody know that? Like, it's so ridiculous. So it's like,
Yeah, no, it's deeply painful. And I know all of us, all of us in this room have had the experience of having to feel like stupid shit like this from people who don't like, who are like, saw a movie where there was a brown person or a black person, and they feel it's like cool to like to talk to us like we're that character in that movie, and you know yeah, sorry,
that's
but
such
yeah.
a that's such a dumbass. Like, when you think about, like, when you just think about like the idea of doing that, it's like, oh yeah, the Karate Kid had that Asian guy in there that one time. There's an Asian guy. he
Yeah.
probably would like if I talk to him like that. It's like that's such a dumbass like
It's such
process
a
of thinking. Like that's so
it seems like,
stupid.
here's the thing though, it's like it seems dumb, but it's a fucking power move. And like, and I've got like, it's never as ignorant as people like to pretend it is. And if you get offended and they get to go, "Oh, why are you being sensitive?" And it's like, fuck you. You know what? I know what you're doing. I know what you're trying to do, and it's not going to work anymore.
I mean, I think it's tricky, and the thing that's tricky about all this is that like there is a value and an important element to the culture in Japan and in China that is tied to like martial arts. And if you go and like, there's if you look at some of the films that come out of China that inspired movies like this, they do play some role in some films, but it's not all encompassing, right? Like if we talk about black culture, there's hip hop is an important part of black culture, but you don't just say, oh, well, there's a black person in the movie, so they're definitely a rapper. Like you don't draw that through line. You can acknowledge that something is a valued part of a culture and have and show respect to that, but not have that be the all encompassing thing about a person. My thing about Mr. Miyagi that really, I actually sat down when I was watching the movie. I kind of, when you first brought up the Karate Kid as a potential one, I didn't even think about two, because two, we can get into two in a second. Two definitely crosses some lines. But one, I was like, man, like let me like how this, let me try to wrap my head around the really more, what's the most offensive thing about Karate Kid one, and I couldn't nail it down until I'm watching the movie, and this happens.
Oh yeah. I was like,
He's
what the hell?
magic.
I was like, what the hell is that?
I was like, oh, that's bad. Because like he's just rubbing his hands together. It's magic. That's
It's
magic.
Yeah.
That is not karate. It's magic.
Yeah,
And so
that's a superpower right there.
right, that's just magic. And they never did, they give it no, there's nothing to it. There's no explanation, there's no talk about it. So it's magic. Like that's all we can derive from it. It's not a technique, it's magic. And so that part of it, I'm like, oh yeah, he is like a magical super figure using his magical karate magic. And I'm just like that.
He's using the force, Chris.
Exactly.
The force.
Yoda. It's so like, and I know Yoda is kind of based on that sensei type senpai like thing.
Well, yeah, that was a
And
little bit of an obsession of George Lucas's, right? Like the whole Eastern culture thing. And we can talk
Kurosawa,
about this in another
Right.
episode.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
Kurosawa was a huge influence on Star Wars, and like, but the thing about in the Japanese, the Okinawa-ness of Mr. Miyagi was, to me, called into question when he shared that he was a soldier in the American military. Because I'm like, okay, he definitely didn't. You definitely didn't. He's been in America for 40 years. Like, you didn't even have to have him be from Okinawa. You could have his father be from Okinawa. And maybe he did learn karate from his father. But like you bent over backwards to have that man have a really broken English after living in America for 40 years. And like there are people who have really strong accents who've been in America for a long time. I'm not saying that that's not, that's not completely, that's not crazy. But it's just that that this actor doesn't have one. And so like knowing that he had to put on an accent that doesn't fully make sense for the character.
It's not required. It's not
right.
necessary, but
It's
it's
not
yeah.
necessary.
It
And
exoticizes him. Like it further exoticizes him and sort of gives him that sort of magical aura. I read that he, like the director or somebody, the producer maybe, didn't want him because he was a comedian, or like he was known for his comic roles, and he had to audition 5 times, and he had made the joke like Miyagi, like it's something funny because he's a funny dude, but like he says something like Miyagi talked this way because he tired. Like because he had to audition a bunch of times, and that was like the one thing that did it when he did the broken English bit. And that's really kind of sad.
Yeah, I watched that interview. There's an interview video of him doing that, and it was just so fun. It was so weird to just watch him, because my wife didn't know. Like literally found out like 2 nights ago that he had no accent, that he just sounded like us. And so we watched this interview, and she was like, "What?" Because he's just,
Yeah.
he's just telling this story, and just real literally, he was kind of an impressionist because he was doing the
Mm-hmm.
voices of all the people in the story, and he sounded completely different, and so it was like, and then he jumped right into Miyagi, and it's like it just shows his level of talent, but it
His
also
talent.
makes you
Yeah.
question like why. But let's before we move forward with the rating this, we got to talk about Karate Kid 2.
We were just kind of laughing because I thought it was hilarious that the girl in the tower that rings the bell to kind of signal everyone that the hurricane is there. Like the first problem that I had was like, why did she stay there? Why and her parents and everyone just left and went to safety while they left her there?
The
A small
7-year-old
child.
girl.
Yeah, while they just left her there to stay there for. There's no more bell ringing there. This is a small village. Like we all are
I
like
think we know the hurricane's close.
we can see it. We like it's like it's pretty outdoorsy. Like everybody can kind of see like if the storm is coming. You can smell rain. Y'all can't smell rain. Motherfucker, like yo, when rain is coming, you can smell it. So it's like, but the thing that like was problematic is like once everybody is in the shelter, it's interesting. Like no one else had morality other than the one Italian white kid. Like all these other people are like, yeah, we're just gonna let that little girl die like out there. And the one like the one like white savior character, I guess, is the only character that. Well, I won't say that because
You need to see The Outsiders. It'll all make sense.
I won't just say him because he went, but also the two women went with him and then obviously Miyagi went out there. But it was just interesting that this whole entire town is like nobody has any type of morality.
Even though honor is very important
It's very
in
important, but
Okinawa.
no one has honor.
Right.
there.
Like how do you define honor? Because
Yeah.
like, yeah, you let so and like and the fact that that's not even the only moment where so Daniel comes into Okinawa.
With this
The
fucking
only
book.
right.
His
And
book.
Oh, I
He has
hate
a
those
book.
scenes. It's such
He
like
has a book.
it's such lazy. That's such lazy exposition.
Kumiko's
To,
like
like
showing him the castle, and he's like, "Oh, the Peace King," and I'm like, "Don't white splain
yeah.
Okinawa history to this girl right now,
Because you read a
Daniel."
book. Yeah.
so, I saw something like with the director where I guess he was very into Japanese culture or something like that, and they use that as a way to like. It's such a lazy way of like exposition, like where they're just throwing in these random facts about Japan to, I guess, inform people or whatever. And he's just like randomly reading off stuff. Like he's asleep on the plane trying to read off stuff. He's walking around reading off stuff. It's just really lazy expositions. Like, come on.
So he comes into Okinawa and starts solving all their problems because he's because like he busts Chosen ripping
Hmm.
people off, right? So he fixed that.
Yeah.
He fixed Miyagi's 40-year beef with Sato. Got this magic touch, and I don't know what is it about Daniel that's different from everyone else here that makes him so special.
That these people can't solve the fact that these people can't solve any of their own problems, but some 18-year-old, however old he is in this movie, can solve all of them is extremely offensive. These are like older people. A lot of these people in this village are like older, which means they've had some experience living here.
Successful business owners and
Exactly.
like
Like they know better, way, way far more better what to do and how to survive in this environment than Daniel does. He's never been here before. Like, how would he know any of this stuff?
And when he asks Kumiko, like, "What do you want to do?" and she shows him remember the TV, like it's like a TV store, and it's a fucking ballerina doing ballet. It's like a Western art, and she's like, "Oh, they don't have that here." Like that. I was, and Yeah, there's nothing
And
redeemable
his
about that for
solution
me.
is come with me to the States.
Come
Yeah,
with me
And
to the
Miyagi's
States.
like, come with me to
Hmm.
the States. Yeah.
and
Hmm.
they all speak English. Oddly, we were
Well, yeah,
watching.
because every single fucking actor is a native English speaker. Did you guys notice when BD Wong shows up
I
randomly?
saw.
BD Wong? Wait, where?
He goes, "Oh,
No,
Komiko, you go to dance tonight," and I'm like, "That's fucking BD Wong right there. He's Chinese American."
me and my wife were watching that, and we watch like SVU like all the time,
Yeah.
like and he's in Jurassic Park too. But we were watching it, and I was like, "Oh, BD Wong, yeah." I was like, "BD Wong," and then he put this accent. I was like, "What the hell?" I was like,
What
"That's
the
not
hell? What are
Oh
you doing
no.
here?
yeah,
It's so weird because they draw more attention to it because when they get off the plane and Chosen's at the airport, Miyagi's like, "You speak English quite well." Like he points out that Chosen speaks English really well, and then literally everybody else in the movie speaks English, and doesn't speak any. Only speaks English to each other alone without Daniel present,
yeah,
and it's just like. Why are they speaking English? And like, and we know why, but like, it's
Because none
just
of the actors actually spoke
and,
Okinawan.
and because they were never gonna make a movie where
oh no,
they were never gonna cast people who spoke. I mean, even if they did, they would have made them speak English because
Yeah.
it's for American audiences. And but it's just you reflect on it now, and it's like, what? That's so jarring. It,
yeah. And to make him sound, I like how Sato sounds like Master Splinter, like the whole movie, or
Oh
like a
yes!
Dragon
Oh my
Ball Z.
god,
Yeah, I was gonna
yes!
say Sato sounds like Vegeta. No, Sato
Yeah, but
sounds like Miyagi sounds like Splinter. Sato sounds
yeah,
like Vegeta.
yeah, yeah.
I'm like, is your throat
Oh, my
raw? Do you need like
honor!
do you need a lozenge?
It's like whoa, and like and Jamie, it was funny because my wife we were watching it and she was like, every time he talks, she's like, "Oh my god!" And then like right after he's that rainy that stormy night when the next day they talk to him and he's just like, "Oh Miyagi-san," and it's just like I was like, "Oh, he does have a normal voice," and she's like, "Yeah, he got rid of all that pent up rage, so now he sounds like a human again." But
I was
Yeah,
like,
it was
oh,
so.
that's gotta be uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, the second movie like really the one other thing that kind of bugged me like that I feel like it undercut in the first movie was sort of this. I could buy into the beef between him and Sato, fine. The problem that I have is that he married someone. He had a love of his life that he spoke like passionately about in the first movie,
and it wasn't
where
her.
to the point, yeah, to the point where you could see he was distraught over losing because she died in childbirth and his child died. Like he lost his son and his wife simultaneously, so he moved on and he married someone and had a love of his life. To throw this character in here and have like this sort of rift between them over this relationship that like, wait, what? Like he had somebody that we like knew about in this last movie.
Listen, this
That
this movie this movie is all about throwing away the people we loved in the first movie. So
I was like,
much
what? That's
poor
so
Allie.
Yeah, and what I want to say, like, as somebody who grew up in Southern California and is back here now, and like I grew up, and I don't want this to be sound judgmental, but like I didn't grow up around Asian Americans. I didn't really have any friends. Like I didn't know anyone until I got to maybe high school. Um, but like I remember we'd go to the indoor swap meet, and I remember everybody that was Asian was called Chinito, Chino Chinito. I don't know if you guys were aware of that, but like Chicanos tend tend to group all Asians into this one category, which means like Chinese, basically. And it never occurred to me as a kid to like in any way like question as I've spoken to, like Mr. Miyagi was beloved, and it didn't occur to me to like question like the sanctity of that. But then that's a weight I've never had to carry. And in talking to friends actually, like firsthand, and asking their opinion. Like there's a friend of mine I talked to. I was like, hey, like, and he was probably like exactly around like Daniel the character's age, right? When this was coming out, and he was like, I hated that shit,
I mean,
and
that's yeah.
I don't think necessarily like the feelings are the same now, but he's like, yeah, it fucking sucked. Like it was already hard. But like that gave people like the right to think, or that seemed to give people the right, and it's not that the movie caused it. It was that in the context, sorry, I feel like I say the word context like 2,000 times an episode, but like in the in the context in the context of like understanding what what it was like to experience this movie, when it came out, like it was not easy for people who had to carry the weight of it. And I think like I can say that about, you know, I think we can say that about any like any word or any group or any stereotype. It's like if you've never had to carry the weight of that stereotype, you need to fucking be careful about it. You need to be thoughtful about the way you interact with it, and the way you question it and the way you take it as real.
So how do we rate the Karate Kid Part 1 and 2? Do we want to I think we kind of look at these as one thing to rate, right? Like I don't think we need to necessarily separate them, although I would actually, you know what? Maybe we should because
Yeah, because
What
this,
I will
yeah,
say though, and this is like in again context of talking about the magical Negro trope, and what's troubling about that is that the magical Negro does not get a backstory, does not get a rich history. And the reason that I wanted to talk about Karate Kid 2 was that I felt like at least the movie tried to do that, to give
yeah.
Miyagi some sort of like some character development, and I think it's valuable in that way. So,
Mhm.
sorry, just wanted to put that out there.
that's true. The second movie is Miyagi's movie. Actually, it's not really, which it makes it strange that it ends with Daniel. But yeah,
We know why that is. We
yeah,
established that. He's the
Does
white
Miyagi
Italian
wait,
guy. Come
this is
on.
Miyagi like every movie at the end.
yeah.
Every movie.
The knowing smile of Mr.
I
Miyagi.
want to
Yeah.
see him fucking chugging champagne and having
But
Gatorade dumped
that's
on him at
no,
some
but
point.
that harkens to, Miles's point of it's about fathers and sons, and that's a very fatherly,
Yeah, that's
proud.
great.
You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like it's such
that's
a.
great.
He's like that's my boy is what he's
Hmm.
saying.
Very
Um,
nice.
but okay, who wants to rate this thing first?
I'll
These
go.
things.
I've decided that I've made my peace with this movie.
Hmm. Is
That's
that
it.
the extent of your rating?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna double on what she said. Yeah, like I don't, I just like it's like it feels like the Vasquez situation where even though I know like there's something problematic here, it feels like it was somewhat done with care almost. Like even though like the performance is offensive, like if like when you look at the amount of like detail, I feel like they gave him like there was stuff in there like I saw that they fought for like the story of like his wife and him losing his kid
Hmm.
and him even just being in the military and being proud actually of fighting in World War II and him having medals. Like they gave him like a lot of like character development that they did not need to give him. Like they could have just made him the silent teacher that's just like the magical
Mysterious and
Asian.
magical. Hmm.
Yeah, and that is a part of it, but there is some you could tell like the people that wrote this character cared about this character to some degree. Like they did give him some nuance and some sort of personality. He wasn't because he was. They actually showed him being vulnerable. He
Hmm.
wasn't like just perfect,
Mhm.
and they showed him being vulnerable. So they did give him some sort of like other character beats that like watching it this time. I'm like, wow, they actually gave him some interesting
Hmm.
characteristics that they could have just said like, "Yo, he's just the guy that trains him. This is all about Daniel, and he just teaches him how to throw punches and stuff." And they didn't do that. Like they actually took some care to actually make this sort of a more dynamic character. So for that, it makes the movie that much better, and it makes it more genuine. It makes their relationship more genuine. It makes everything feel more authentic because I think the people that were writing it cared about the characters. So for that, even though it is like I said problematic, I'm probably gonna watch this again like tomorrow or something. I don't know. Like it's good. It's a good watch. Like super rewatchable.
Yeah. No, I do love the character of Mr. Miyagi, and I think that it is. I like the Vasquez comparison because this is another situation like that where there are things about it that are definitely there's a racism in this, um, but the intent is important. We always bring that up, the intent and the context, and the I think the intent was from a place of warmth and trying to actually build a compelling character. There's a version of this movie where, Mr. Miyagi teaches Daniel karate and then like dies in the third act. And
Or he actually like flies away into the trees or something.
yeah,
I could see that. Sorry.
goodbye, Daniel-san.
Like Mary Poppins.
Right.
We
So
should
like,
call this episode Miyagi Poppins. So,
I fortunately they didn't actually do that. But yeah, like, and I do feel like, and obviously we don't want to slip into the it could have been worse territory, right? But it could have been worse. And like I do, yeah, I think the characters were handled with care. The performances really save it too. Like the performances in the second movie in particular really save it because Daniel is absolutely a white savior trope in that movie to the
Mhm.
whole island of Okinawa. And Mr. Miyagi's story beats don't quite make a lot of sense in the second movie in relation to what happened in the first one, but the performances carry it through. And so for me, I think one of the bigger things for me that I asked myself going in was, if we're asking, okay, is this movie racist and what does that mean? For me, it was like, will I show this to my younger kids after looking at it through this lens, and like, or will I feel weird about showing it to them? And I'm gonna show this to my younger kids
Mhm.
because I know they'll connect with the characters because one of them is one of my kids, and I know that it's coming from a place of love and we can have that conversation. And so this kind of once again fits into like classic with a conversation territory for me because yes, afterwards I'm gonna be like, yeah, I mean, there's parts of this that probably didn't need to be the way that they were. But what this is as a movie is so inspiring and so heartwarming and so special that I don't think that can be understated when we talk about the Karate Kid, part one and two.
Like a knight in shining armor.
I feel like my daughter watching it, I don't think like she clearly obviously she's 12, so she's, still a kid. But just her perspective of it, I don't she doesn't take she's not jaded yet. So like she doesn't see any of this. Like she just likes Mr. Miyagi or likes Daniel or because above all, like the things that may be wrong with it, there's a great message in this movie. There's a great story there, like of just like I said about fathers and sons, but also in addition to that, there's a thing in there about restraint and like sort of that idea of you don't have to do certain things. Like there's like the idea of how a man is supposed to react to something or how this toxic like masculinity factor of like, well, a man does this, you're gonna let him punk you got to do this. And there's this idea of, well, no, like I could be the bigger man and I could not do anything to you and just move on. Because in the reality of it, like when you look back, like how significant was that, like this interaction at all? Like once he moves on from that, you're not even thinking about that anymore. So there is like good messages in there, I think, for people, but especially young boys, where it's like, hey, yeah, you don't have to be, the tough guy. Like you don't have to resort to physical violence to like solve your problems. Like there are other ways of solving your problems, and we see that the characters that result to physical violence, they get punished for it. There's consequences, so there's good lessons here. Like in addition to it,
And
just
they end up being
yeah,
cowards, especially like Chosen. Like he's actually a coward,
yeah.
Yeah.
you know.
So I think we did it. I think we did it, y'all. I think we figured it all out. Karate Kid. No,
We've answered the problems.
I feel like this is the funnest episode so far.
This is my favorite movie to rewatch too. Like it really was.
Because all of the other ones were like kind of real dark and
Downers.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Aliens was good, but yeah, like then it kind of went because Pulp Fiction's not a dark movie, but yeah,
There's some stuff there.
It's not uplifting.
Yeah.
Heck no, none of this is our first truly inspiring movie, I'll say.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching. Please comment, please share, and definitely let us know what you think of the Karate Kid and whether it holds up in 2020. We appreciate everybody who's joined us, and we'll see you next week.